All right, Deputy Mayor, we are live.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. Good evening, Council. Good evening, Administration. Being 6:33, I'll call this Standing Committee of Council to order. We have a few amendments to the agenda this evening. Under new business, H, I, J, and K will now become A, B, C, and D. And the rest will just follow accordingly. We also have an addition to the agenda, and that is under new business L, an excused absence for Councillor Grunewagen. All in favor of the adoption of the agenda? Okay, agenda is passed.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, can we have a motion?
Sorry, yeah. We need a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Duford, seconded by Councillor Chambers. All in favor? Okay, motion's passed. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Bouchard.
Yeah, the new item 6J, land disposal. I may be involved through my company.
Okay, thank you. Announcements, awards, ceremonies, and presentations. Anything from council? Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to extend a thank you from the Campground Christmas crew that happened this past weekend. It was very successful. So over the 3 days, we raised nearly $6,000 from admissions only. That's on top of all the food donations we received and the Secret Santa gifts that were dropped off. So we just wanted to give a big thank you to the community, everyone who came out to support the event, as well as all of the volunteers and sponsors and businesses who were involved, either setting up or taking down or decorating sites. It was a cold week leading up to it and a cold weekend, but all in all, it was a good event. So thank you.
Anything else from council? Okay, I just have one. Was privileged and honored to attend the 63rd annual Firefighters Ball this weekend. Always a privilege to be there, and I just want to congratulate and thank all of our members of the Hayward Fire Department for their service to the community, and all of those award winners for their long service, and of course to our Firefighter of the Year award winner, Trina Swan. And then just moving on to administrative inquiries, I will turn the floor over to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Administration will keep our administrative inquiries short this evening, given the length of the agenda and the importance of getting through those items. So we will start with the Director of Protective Services, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'll just give a quick update. Currently for the month of December, we've run 22 ambulance calls to date, 1 rescue call and 1 false alarm. And the only other thing I want to add to the, in addition to my report, is that, yes, I want to echo your congratulations. We did have our 63rd annual Firefighters Ball on Saturday at the Legion, and the event was a success. It was great to hand out some awards and appreciation and recognition of service to our members. And I also wanted to just thank you for attending the event and saying some kind words on behalf of the town council. And we really appreciate it. Thanks for the support.
SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We'll go next to the Director of Finance.
Good evening. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So Finance and Administration has been working towards several items to see before on the agenda this evening. A couple of quick updates. Staff has been quite busy with our month-end close and preparing for our fiscal year end in December. We received an update from MACA regarding the PATA review, which the town was involved with earlier in the year. So MACA is using a phased approach to update PATA that will result in 2 legislative proposals being advanced. The first proposal is to be completed in 2022. That'll address some of the administrative issues which have been raised. And the second proposal will be more comprehensive, and that'll be coming forward in 2023. Lastly, we did receive confirmation that an extension was granted to the deadline for when the town will receive its assessment roll. I mentioned that this was a potential. In November, we got confirmation that the deadline has been pushed from October 31st to December 31st. We still don't know the full impact of this, but we're anticipating that it may cause a 1-month delay in when we're able to levy taxes. That concludes my updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Finance. SAO Smith.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I did note that Councillor McGill had a question there if you want to.
Oh, my apologies, Councillor McGill. Go ahead.
This is actually for the fire chief. I just had a couple of questions regarding how many volunteer hours by the town employees were in responding to emergencies during work hours. And I noted in there in the report, there was a lot of false alarms this last month. And do we have an education plan in place, or thinking about an education plan, and maybe get out and reach out to constituents and let them know that, calling, for a stub toe or something is not really an emergency?
Thank you, Councillor McGill. And just a reminder to all of council, a procedural reminder that all questions should come through the chair. I could be wrong, but a lot of these false alarms are usually coming from fire alarm systems, but I'll turn that over to SAO Smith, and if his director has any input on that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Maybe with respect to the question on quantifying the hours of staff, maybe we can just bring that back to a future meeting if that's okay. I think we have recently added a couple staff members that are just being trained, but we do have our council administrator and of course our current our director of protective services. So we can get back to you on that. As for the false alarms, it's typically in everyone's interest to not have a false alarm by way of bylaw. I believe we are able to charge for those false alarms, but yeah, you're correct that typically they are coming from automated systems.
Yeah, sorry for the protocol.
Go ahead, Councillor McGill.
So I think I was just wondering if we were considering putting an education plan in place just to educate those people who are calling and for not appropriate emergency situations.
Okay, noted, Councillor McGill, and thank you. So I think if most of them are coming from automated systems, it's tough. I know that system that I have is every time the power bumps, there's an alarm of some kind. So potentially, I'm sure, and if I could be assuming here, but if there are false alarms due to maybe calls coming that aren't emergencies, that there would be some communication. But SAO Smith.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I don't believe we have a plan in place right now, but we'll take that for input and prioritize it appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, SAO Smith, and thank you, Councillor McGill, for the questions. SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We'll go next to the Director of Recreation and Community Services.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Most updates are in the monthly report for this month. Just would like to underline the fact that operations are going well at the community center. Business hours haven't changed, and ice user groups are making good use of the facilities. The aquatic center, mechanical is operating well, and we're seeing good numbers at the aquatic center. At this time, we're spending a lot of our time and resources on preparations for the holiday season. And a couple of the events that I'd like to underline is that we have the Santa Claus parade this Friday, using the usual route, which starts from the service road near some of our businesses along the highway, and that parade will be going through the downtown core and ending near the Rose Building in the new construction in that area. We also have Skate with Santa planned for this Sunday at the community center at the Aurora Ford Arena. That is from 1 to 2:30 p.m. There are 3 different blocks of skating times, and people should be calling ahead to book their skating times. There are also quite a few other activities that are planned in the community. It's very nice to see all the activities that are being planned, which includes the Festival of Trees at the community center, which will officially begin this Wednesday. There have been some trees that have been put out already, but it officially begins for visits on December 8th, this Wednesday. For further information on all the activities going throughout the season, I'd encourage anybody to visit the Town of Hay River Recreation Facebook page, as well as the town's main Facebook page and our website. Our recreation programming supervisor has prepared 3 posters that outline the activities kind of on a timeline type thing, the kickoff events, the events that are happening near to Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then the activities that are happening between Christmas Day and New Year's Day. Those are my updates at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rec Director, SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a few things from me. First, just wanted to provide notice that did have a meeting with the Habitat for Humanity NWT actually today. It was around potential for a home build project in Hay River in 2022. So they've reached out to us and had that conversation, in discussions on if it might be a partnership that we would be, this council will be looking to undertake. So my suggestion or thought would be that administration will prepare a report to council on that topic for an upcoming meeting. On the electrical franchise, so we are moving through the next arbitration process. Both parties have submitted responses to the items that are under arbitration. So our legal parties have been preparing our responses for the town of Hay River. Those have been reviewed and will be submitted. Our community housing plan project continues to move along. Coming up to be released, I think, to the public on December 13th is a housing survey. So this has been drafted and will be reviewed by the advisory committee ahead of that release. Official invitations have been coming out from the NWTAC about the AGM that will be held here in Hay River at the community center for the week of March 24th. Invites going out to all communities throughout the Northwest Territories. So planning for a good turnout for that event, which could see over 100 attendees. Been providing updates on our town hall abatement and demolition project. So unfortunately, we've had to delay that to the spring. We're working with the proponent to try to get them in before we got into the winter months, but certainly over this weekend, winter has arrived. So rather than incurring increased expenses associated with heating costs, we're going to move that to the spring. Had a meeting with Canor, or actually this is an announcement from Canor that we've received this week. So as the past council would note, we did submit an application to support the Bob McMeekin Park through Canor's one of their funding streams. And we have just received notice that we are receiving $212,000 for that project. And lastly, did have a meeting with Canor. There's an expression of interest deadline of December 15th for new projects, and we have had a meeting with our planner and engineer to discuss an application for the Sundog Business Park portion of that design. And that concludes administration's update, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, SAO Smith. Are there any questions from council? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to new business. 6A, budget survey results. Do we have a motion from council? Go ahead, Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Deputy. I'm just looking for it.
Yeah, maybe if we could get administration to pull that up on our split screen there.
Oh, I think I have it. Okay, I'll move the recommendation that the council of the town of Hay River accepts this information item on survey results as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. We have a seconder to the motion. Councillor Willows. Any questions to the motion? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to 6B, library funding agreement report. We have a motion from council. Councillor Chambers, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Mayor, I'm looking for this one too.
It'll be on page 57, Councillor Chambers.
Of the original?
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Willows, in the meantime.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think we need to go back to A to everybody to vote on it. And I don't know about everybody else's screen, but my screen is not moving to the motions.
I think you're correct, Councillor Willows. Can we get an all in favor on the budget survey results? Thank you. All in favor motion, sorry, agreed to take forward to the next meeting. And now moving on to the library funding agreement.
I have
Sorry,
it now.
I'm just a substitute teacher here tonight, guys. Sorry.
I'll move the recommendation that the council of the town of Hay River approve entering into a 4-year funding agreement with the Hay River Library Committee in the amount of $179,000 per year as recommended by the Finance Committee.
We go ahead. Councillor Willow, second. Any questions from council? I just have one question, and maybe just for clarity for the record. Looking back at our previous, like previous year by year average, what is there an increase, a decrease, hold the line? Where are we on this with this agreement? Should it pass? SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll pass the response on to the Director of Finance, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't have those exact figures here immediately in front of me. I can get them for you. We did look at where they've been at for the past 10 years. It's hovering around 160 grand from, I'm going to say 2010 until 2013, bumped up to 165 for a few years. There was 2 years where it was above 170, and then it was pulled back to 165 for a couple more years. So when we looked at this, when we as a finance committee discussed it, and we met with the Hay River Library Committee, the intention behind this was coming up with an agreement that would work for both parties. So by setting this agreement, it gets it out of the annual budget cycle. It pulls it out of the community enhancement grant, which this was always the vehicle for which the town funded the library, but it didn't really fit with the spirit of what that policy was intended for. And by setting it as a 4-year agreement, the idea behind that was that it will allow the next council to have a year under their belts for when this agreement comes up for renewal. And then at that point, we'd be recommending 3-year agreements going forward. So it helps the library committee because it secures their funding. The amount we looked at, it hadn't bumped up in several years, and they are facing they're facing inflation just like just about everybody else at this point. So this 179,000 really provides the core funding for their staffing operation, and so that was how we came up with that amount. It's also what they'd requested. So thank you.
Okay, thank you to our Director of Finance, Councillor Bouchard.
Yeah, just noting when we did have a meeting with them in the Finance Committee group there, they said that any of that pressure that they see, they will, maintain or try to generate other revenue if the costs go up higher. So this does lock us in for a 3-year term, and the new council, after, a period of time, will be able to review it again in 3 years. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bouchard. Anything else from council on that? Seeing nothing, agreed to take forward? Okay, agreed. On to J, the consolidated capital budget, 2022 consolidated capital budget. Do we have a motion? Councillor Willows?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that the council of the town of Hay River approves the 2022 capital budget as presented and recommended by the Finance Committee on the condition that the projects that are identified for funding through third-party sources are approved in principle, subject to confirmation of the contributing funding approval.
Thank you, Councillor Willows. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bouchard? Maybe we just turn this over to SAO Smith. We can maybe have a brief run through.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Director of Finance is going to present both the capital and O&M budget. I'll just a quick introduction for me. The Director will provide some more background on the budget preparation process, but I guess we're pleased to publicly provide or present both of the budgets that have been reviewed and recommended by the Finance Committee. So we started our work officially about 4 months ago in September on gathering, reviewing, and now here in December for presenting the information. So both budgets are supported by past planning documents. I just want to recognize the work and effort, especially of the prior council on the capital planning tools the 10-year capital plan that contributes to really made this process for the 2022 budget quite streamlined. So I'll pass it on to the Director of Finance for his comments and presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a confirmation, everyone was able to see the PowerPoint in front of you? Great. Okay, so as SAO Smith commented, prior to our new council being sworn in, previous council did have an opportunity to review the town's 10-year capital plan. It's a very detailed document, shows the forecasted spend and funding for the next decade. And in order to meet this plan, it requires an annual transfer to capital from our operating budget. So just a couple of comments before I get into the 2022 capital. We did, in an effort to increase engagement, we received some inputs from the public through a survey. So we've incorporated some of that information into this and into our knowledge of kind of where the town, where the residents want us to go. Previous years, we started with O&M first, and then we rolled into capital. This year, we decided to change it up because we think by showing capital first, it really demonstrates our need for that transfer to capital. So with that said, we'll jump right into it here. So this is...
Sorry, Director, I don't mean to interrupt. Councillor Bouchard, you had your hand up there.
Well, I just had a question on the protocol because, we approved the capital budget. What happens if the O&M budget doesn't get approved tonight? So, obviously we have other reserve money in there. So it's just I'm just wondering if one's cart before the horse or 6 of one, half a dozen the other. I'm just looking for protocol as far as approving the O&M is typical, I would think first, but, and I know they are, I personally know they are linked to, like, we get money from our surplus from our O&M to put it into the capital, but does it commit us one way or the other is my question.
Yeah, good point, Councillor Bouchard. I do want to note to all of council and to those watching that nothing is being approved this evening. This is a committee meeting, so we will have the opportunity to have an official vote on this at our next regular meeting. But on the question, I'll just jump in here on the director for a moment, if I can, on to SAO Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I think you raised a good point that it is presented today for an actual approval at what is scheduled for our December 20th meeting. We had some conversation on which one could be presented ahead of the other. For the points that the Director of Finance was mentioning, it seems key to, from our perspective, at least administration's perspective, to present the capital first, just because it does outline sort of the need for funding it, which gets presented, really ties into our O&M budget next. So yeah, I don't know that it matters too much, but this was just the thought choice.
Thank you, SAO Smith. Councillor Bouchard, are you all right with proceeding this way this evening?
Yeah, no, I guess my question would just be, can you do one without the other? And can you do the capital without O&M? And can you do the O&M without capital? Obviously, I think you can do the capital without O&M, but just, yeah. And it's just a protocol because I'm supporting both of them. I've reviewed it. I was at the finance committee meeting and stuff. I just in case one of those years where you have a bunch of issues or there was an issue, you might run into problem if you don't have the passing the budget, you know, depending on the procedure wise. If you pass capital and then your O&M doesn't get passed because someone doesn't want to do the increase or someone doesn't want to do that, something in the O&M budget or vice versa. So it is maybe, I mean, we should figure out those hairs just so that, you know, on a controversial year, and I'm not saying this one is, but protocol should be in set up. So anyways, thanks.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Bouchard, and sure that's noted. SAO Smith, if you want to pass it on to your director again.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. On to Sam, Director of Finance.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So this opening slide here shows our aggregated spend by department for or aggregate budgeted spend by department for 2022 and 2021. As you can see, we're showing an overall increase of around $500,000. However, I'd like to point out that our 2022 budget does include approximately $4 million of carry forwards, which we identified as part of our Q3 2021 update. Unsurprisingly, the bulk of our budgeted spend for 2022 is focused around public works, with smaller portions allocated to land development, recreation, and community administration and protective services. Moving on to the next slide here. So this slide really details out our funding mix, how we get to that $19 million. You know, there's lots of different pots of money that the town accesses. Some of it is more secured or guaranteed than others. CPI is territorial funding, gas tax is federal. I'll just speak to some of the larger dollar amounts. The ICIP, a large chunk of that relates to the funding that we secured a couple of years ago for the new lift station and the road work at Riverview, Beaver, and Caribou Crescent. Disaster mitigation, that $1.4 million, that relates to the funding that we've requested for the berm work. And the other big dollar item on here, which I'll speak to at the end of this presentation, is a drawdown in our reserves. So that's that $5.6 million. So this slide just shows us where our funding sources is, again, at a high level, whether it's internal or external. So you can see that for year over year, we're increasing the amount that we're funding internally. But in general, we're still about 70% of our funding dollars come from external sources. So now I'm going to go through, just for the purpose of flow, again, it's your discretion, Deputy Mayor, but prefer if we hold questions until the end, just so I can get through the subject matter. And then we'll open it up at that point for questions and discussion. So the next few slides go department by department, and we've broken out the projects into, we've color coded it so that viewers can have a general understanding of the cost of each of these projects. So green is under 50 grand, yellow is between 50 to 250. Orange is 250 to 750, and then if it's over 750,000, it's red. So I'm just going to speak to a few of the larger dollar projects that are on this list. And again, we'll begin with public works. This is excluding the land and road work. There are separate slides for that. So the big dollar item on this slide relates to our lift station upgrade project. That work had largely been completed and commenced in 2021, but there is still a carry forward into 2022 for that project. Continuing public works, here is the large dollar item on this slide is the Shoreline flood mitigation project, which again I spoke to a little bit earlier, but that's repairs the Alaska Road berm and extending that berm to the entrance of West Channel. Moving on to public works, this is specifically land development. So the big dollar item on the list for 2022 is our Fraser Place subdivision development. Again, we'd initially budgeted those dollars to be spent in 2021 for a variety of reasons. That did not proceed as initially budgeted, but we've moved that item into 2022. Moving on to roads. So this is where the bulk of our dollars are budgeted to be spent. So we're looking at continuing our road work on Riverview and Beaver Crescent, along with some work on Capitol Drive, water mains, and upgrades to the Industrial Drive base and paving and some underground work there. Under recreation, so just to comment on recreation, with only a limited number of exceptions, recreation projects they're entirely funded externally. So really rec has to go out and hustle to get their dollars for new capital things. There are a few of these items that have some reserve dollars allocated, but the vast majority of their funding comes from third-party sources. And some of these items were included initially in the 2021 budget, but as a result of primarily COVID-related delays, some of this work didn't get completed. So I won't speak at great length to any of these. Moving on to administration and tourism. The big dollar item on here is just where we continue to service the debt related to the recreation center. So that's the big dollar item on this list. And protective services, we just have one item on the list there for heavy truck replacement. So final slide for our capital budget. So this is an important slide. This feeds into our own discussion, and this is where we show we show our reserves year over year and how we anticipate to add to them and draw down. Again, council will have discretion, and it'll be based on where we actually land at the end of the year. But we've forecasted where we think we're going to be based on our Q3 update. for 2021 and allocated those reserves, and we're budgeting $1.7 million in 2022 to be in addition to reserves. You can see that our 2022 projected spend out of reserves is 5.6 million. So we're going to be drawing down on the reserves pretty heavily, and the landfill reserve is restricted for purposes of closing down or mitigating that landfill. So we're based on where we plan to be. We're not going to be leaving a whole lot of funds in our reserve. Now, the situation will get a bit better as we go, but it is crucial that we continue to add to our reserves each year. When I showed the slide earlier with the 70% of external funding, in order for us to be able to go after those dollars, there's quite often you have to have your own share. You have to be able to put up 25 cents on the dollar. And so if we don't have reserves to be able to go after that, then we can't do that work, which, it's critical that we're able to do that because these funds aren't always available. There's pots of money available at different points in time, and we've got to be able to go after them. I've heard of other municipalities in the north that, they've had the need, but they haven't had the reserves to be able to go after it. And so it's important that the town be in a position of strength and be able to pursue those dollars. And with that concludes my capital presentation. I'll close with comments that we did go through this quite thoroughly in Finance Committee, and it was agreed to be brought forward at that point. And so I'll pass it back to SAO Smith if he has any closing comments, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I don't think I really have much to add. I pointed out in my introduction there that a lot of the good work has been done in developing our 10-year capital plan by council. Past council, I think it was twice updated over last year. So a lot of the work is just coming from plans and then balancing the funds to appropriately pay for the initiatives, not only in this plan or not only in this year's budget, but moving forward through the next 10 years. I guess we open the floor. Deputy Mayor, to any questions?
Thank you, SAO Smith, and thank you, Director. And yes, before we get to questions, I do just want to point out again that this is not going to be final approval this evening. This is an opportunity for us to ask some questions and give us some time to consider what's being told to us and what we're seeing in front of us. And we will have further time to consider all of this information in the lead up to the final approval of this at our regular meeting. But so just opening the floor to questions. Do we have any? Councillor Bouchard, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, we just talked about the reserves and the levels and stuff like that in our 10-year plan. I think I was asking for kind of that timeline, or I want to call it the debt wall that we have with our reserves dipping down and what the year is the lowest and stuff like that. I think that ties to our 10-year capital. It'd be nice to see that, just to see where we're the lowest. It is concerning. I mean, I think I talked to some people during the federal election that we receive a ton of money to do a lot of our development and stuff like that. If we didn't have that federal, I want to say federal government, but some of it's territorial, a lot of projects wouldn't get done. I'm just wondering about, do we know some of the timelines of CPI and tax, gas tax? Or have the federal government told us and territorial government told us the timelines? Is there 6 years left in that? I'm assuming they're going to continue to support infrastructure, but do some of those programs that we're very reliant on, do some of them have a expiry date?
Thank you, Councillor Bouchard. SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm not aware of any projected changes. We have seen some bump ups in recent years and some commitments from the current GNWT government and MACA towards seeing funding some of the gaps that are recognized by those bodies. We have seen the gas tax. It's now actually termed a different fund. I can't remember the name. where we have seen doubling in recent years, including this 2021. So I don't think we're at risk of seeing significant cuts to those dollars. I would only hope that we see potential increases and sometimes surprises that benefit us. In terms of other funding sources, like we do rely a lot, and including in this plan, as an example, the Shoreline flood protection project. We've submitted an application for almost $1.2 million, I believe, on that one, and it's still pending approval. So we do rely heavily on other federal and territorial, federal dollars mostly for funding projects in this year's budget and in future years. And those ones come with more uncertainty because we're competing with other organizations for those funds. So it kind of points towards the importance of applying for money and funding, and when you get it, to be in a position to spend.
Thank you, SAO Smith. Any other questions? Councillor McGill, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just regarding the green space revitalizations, I had a bunch of questions, and I was just wondering, do we need another stage since we have one on the beach that we don't use? We have a portable stage that we just purchased, and we're just starting to roll out and start to use, and it could be put anywhere. We seem to have not enough staff to take care of all the green spaces that we currently have because we're contracting out to take care of those. And just wondering, are we putting more on our plate than we can handle? And are we going to have to contract out to take care of these things? And I can go back to the question survey that we did, and taxpayers indicated that they had concerns over land use and planning. And about 66% were fair to dissatisfied. 70% were surveyed and said that for green spaces and parks, that the town should maintain taxes and fees even if service is reduced to maintain. And 70% of those surveys stated that the cost of living was their biggest concern. So I just was wondering if we need these park revitalizations right now. Are they something that we can afford and can maintain?
Thank you, Councillor McGill. I'll pass that on to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Several questions there, so let me know if I've missed any or have gotten off topic here. But in terms of maybe I'll just speak to the scope of the project. So maybe even before that. So these are already agreements that have been put in place that outline the project scope, and there's been consultation and discussion at council level. So yeah, I mean, going back on canceling those agreements might not be a good thing. I will say that we are still in a position of scoping those projects more fully. We actually had a meeting last week with our consulting project manager, just to ensure that we are spending this season working on design, but also some of the further scoping that's needed. The three green spaces are in themselves essentially existing parks. Abatement Park is his long-standing park there. Port Landing, our marina, which has been operating for many years. And then the Old Town Park is also another park that over the years we've taken away. We've had to decommission some of the elements of it, including the ball diamond. And now we're actually on the agenda for today, looking to dispose of a lot. We've rezoned and added lots in that area that are residential, and as such have lost space for some of the recreation assets that were there. But overall, really upgrades. So Abatement Park, as an example, the welcome sign, it's in rough shape. It's part of this project to replace it. We'll see some general improvements to the area and some commitments. In terms of the maintenance, so really not adding, in some respects, probably reducing maintenance where, we're, as an example, the welcome sign, which does need does need recurring maintenance to maintain it. But all three spaces have already been maintained by town staff. There will be some improvements, but I wouldn't think that the maintenance requirements would increase through them significantly. And then I think there was a question on if we'd have to hire contractors. I don't think so. And some of the beauty of maintaining these green spaces are that we've been able to access summer students through funding arrangements with federal and territorial government. So we access those resources at a very good dollar.
Thank you, SAO Smith. Councillor Bouchard had a question.
Yeah, not a question, just a comment on those green spaces. I support them in the capital plan. I know there's people that have liked the marina now. We've going to expand that usage. I've heard some positive feedback at a fisherman's meeting the other day that people that are tied to here and people that are tied to Yellowknife, that they're liking that thing. I know the Old Town group, people are concerned and want to upgrade there. I know the MLA there has been talking to me and pushing that project. Bobby Meakin Park, I know it's used several times for community and blooms. It's used as a sliding hill. It's used quite a bit in the community. So if we're getting dollars from the federal government, which is 70-80% of the dollars to upgrade those facilities, I'm all for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to say that, these are, some of these projects are also partnerships with local groups or have the support of other groups. A number of these have been in front of the rec board or the rec committee, sorry, and they've all seen the plans or the higher level plans as they are. And as a former resident, I guess it still owes property in the Old Town. There's been many people in Vale Island, neighbors that keep asking me when this is happening. So, and I agree. Anytime we can buy, 25, 30 cent dollars, it's a great opportunity. But Councillor Willows has a question or a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Bouchard, I guess, and any suggestion that we would want to not look at government funding when we're getting 7% of the dollars to beautify our community. I wouldn't support looking at getting rid of those projects. We will not always be in a position where we can get that kind of federal funding. So I'm fully supportive of the capital budget going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willows. Any further questions on this motion? Councillor McGill, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. It wasn't that I wanted to, I just wanted some clarity on the projects and their scope and their size and whether we were actually capable of handling it. I know that there's a cultural component to this funding and for these revitalizations of green spaces, and there'll be buildings that will have to be maintained, which is an extra thing. And then there'll need to be sort of a search for not-for-profits, service clubs or user groups to utilize these things and make them active and alive in a cultural component. So I just wanted some clarity on how this was all going to happen, because the plans were just kind of the plans, but no real sort of understanding of that as it rolls out. So that was my question, Councillor Dowie, Deputy Mayor.
No worries, I'm still getting used to that too. SAO Smith.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, I'm not sure if there was an actual question there. Maybe
Yeah, I know. I just, if you had any other further comment on that, I
don't think so. I think this is specific. It's a specific stream of funding that we've been able to apply for. It's kind of nice to have money as well. That couldn't be applied to any other type of, say, infrastructure projects in the town. So I think we're happy and lucky to get the funding. I think without it, certainly we wouldn't be looking at these projects as we are at this point with the scope. So, and I just wanted to mention that Port Landing, I think like both, at least Port Landing and elements of Abatement Community Park have been coming out of our tourism development plans as well. So the potential for economic stimulus associated with that. But also Port Landing has been one of our few recreation assets which perhaps is receiving a positive return, just based on ability to rent out the slips and see a demand for more.
Thank you, SEO Smith. Are there any further questions on the subject? Any other councillors have anything they wish to bring forward? All right, seeing nothing, I will, oh, sorry, Councillor McGill, one more question there.
Sorry, just moving on. Are we moving on to other topics within recreation?
We can
Deputy Mayor?
move on to any topic within the capital budget presentation that you wish to bring forward right
right.
now. And again, just
I
before
have
we get on to that though, Councillor McGill, I just in recognition of the heavy agenda and the fact that we are not approving this this evening, and this is more for information gathering and acceptance to move this forward as it is. Let's maybe we try to keep these at a fairly high level for this evening, and then over the course of the next well, until the next regular meeting, we can gather some more information. Go ahead.
Okay, no, I was just well, we were provided with the survey results, which gives us some data to dig down into, you know, the decisions we're making, and that's hence the questions that I have, Deputy Mayor. So and maybe I'm wrong, and I'm looking too deeply into this. Maybe that's, you know, the situation, but I am concerned just because I am representing taxpayers, so that's why I'm asking the questions. The digital display, I'm wondering about that when we have the largest portion of people accessing information is through Facebook. Are we really, you know, do we need to spend that, you know, $1 million or whatever, you know? And, you know, I just wanted to kind of understand some of the other stats for like the Ray Benoit, you know, build for the multi-sport use. Can we look at that for future and, you know, use other places in the community that we could access? Anyways, those were just my questions regarding rec.
Thank you, Councillor McGill. And from my own experience, a lot of these questions or a lot of these, you know, plans or approval, and especially on the rec side of things, sitting on the rec committee, they're all fully funded normally from outside funding, or at least at the very least, we are providing a minimal amount in support of that. But you know, maybe we'll give this to SAO Smith, and if the rec director has anything to add, and then we can move on to either other council questions or on to the next one.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess, sorry, I heard the digital display question. That is a project that's been on the plan for at least 2 years now, and I think it's there. It hasn't been canceled. It's been on there with the condition of funding, I believe, 100% of the dollars. So, so if we found the dollars to put to it, it has been one that has seen an interest from the private sector in supporting as well. But until we find the funding, there wouldn't be any spending there. Thoughts for justifying its use, though, really around promotion. So yes, we did see that Facebook is our preferred choice of communication for those who responded to the survey. Survey was communicated through Facebook in a digital format, so we certainly recognize that we're not capturing a lot of the population that perhaps didn't even see the survey posted on Facebook. So I think that's kind of natural to expect those results in the survey. But we do hear quite a bit that you know, other channels should be used for communicating messaging This is a great one for promoting events that are happening at the community center for perhaps tourists or people coming into town to see. We've talked about displaying safety messages around COVID, forest fire alerts, things like that can help out. Also probably generates a good return on revenue just through the advertising portion that would be tied to it. So anyways, no commitment to it unless there is funding received, which we bring forward to council.
Thank you, SAO Smith, and I want to thank council for the questions. Are there any further questions on this, on the capital budget itself? Okay, seeing none, agreed to take forward? Okay, agreed. And then moving on to item 6, I want to say D. We've shuffled things around quite a bit here, and I'm going on 2 different agendas, but the 2022 consolidated O&M budget. Do we have a mover? Councillor Willows, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that the council of the town of Hay River approves the 2022 consolidated O&M budget as presented and recommended by the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Willows. We have a seconder, Councillor Duford. And SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll pass this one directly on to the Director of Finance for presenting.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just one moment while I get the started up here. So the 2022 O&M budget, I'll start by just very briefly going through the 3 funds, speaking to the purpose of each one, and then I'll get into the figures by department. So we'll start with the general fund. So the purpose of this fund is to account for all the financial activities of the town which aren't accounted for in any other fund. So this is really where most of our O&M occurs, excluding utility fund. And again, all of the these slides kind of detail our mandate. So this is all dictated by the Cities, Towns, and Villages Act. And we prepare financial statements for this fund along with the other 2, and those are audited annually and submitted to council for their approval. So the utility fund, this fund is all operations for the town's water and sewer system. One important detail about this fund is it needs to be self-liquidating. So in effect, it has to be able to generate enough revenue to be able to support itself. We've through the utility bylaw and then through the ultimately the fees and charges bylaw, over the past couple of years, we've made some pretty significant changes to how our revenue side relates to this fund. We're also in the process of working through the trucked water contract, and we're looking at our sanitation contract as something that needs to be renewed as well or updated as well. As I said, the utility fund, it needs to at a minimum break even, but it really should be able to provide its own reserves to be able to support its ongoing infrastructure needs. And lastly, the land fund. So this fund relates to acquisition, development, disposal, and rental of municipal land within the town. So this is where any land development activity that will be going through this fund. So on to our 2022 budget. So I'll just quickly go through each one of these assumptions. So inherent in our budget is a lot of funding from the territorial government, and they provide us with planning figures, but they're not actually official until their budget gets approved, and they're on a March year end. So we use those figures for budget purposes, but it is subject to change generally speaking, we haven't seen them give us a number for budget purposes and it be less, but there is always the possibility that. So we start with the assumption that those are good numbers for planning and budget purposes. This year we have mayor and 8 councillor honorariums included in the budget. So there is a slight increase from previous years, but we only had 7. Included in our budget is figures for wage inflation. So the collective agreement, the town is currently part of the way through a 5-year collective agreement. And so there's a 1.75% salary increase as part of that. So that is included in this. Now, with that said, we did increase our vacancy rate a little bit. It was previously at 3%. We bumped that up to 5% to reflect some of the vacancies that we've experienced and just current vacancies that we have. Again, we're attempting to fill all positions, but turnover is a thing. And so we've built in a 5% vacancy rate in the budget, which gets spread across all departments. In reality, when you usually have a vacancy, it's one position in one department. So it's a tough thing to budget for because we don't necessarily know exactly where the vacancies will be, but that rate is included in the budget. So one of the big assumptions is that any net revenue over expenses will be allocated to reserves. So as part of our budget process, we built in, it's effectively an expense item in our budget for $1.7 million to allocate to reserves. So that's that 1.7 million addition that you saw part of our capital presentation. I've got a comment in here about O&M expenses that are contingent on revenue. So similar to some of our capital items, which if we don't get the money from the third-party funder, we won't do it. There are items in our O&M budget that are like that as well. The bulk of them are in recreation, but there are a few elsewhere. One of the assumptions that we build into this is no material increases or decreases to overall core service level. Now it's we, as part of our survey process and just generally the feedback that we receive from the public, we do tweak our service levels from time to time. There's been a few areas that we've flagged that need a bit more attention, but on the whole, we're trying to maintain our service level, which again it's tough in a high inflation environment like what we're currently in. But that is the target. That is one of the assumptions in our budget. And lastly, the targeted revenue increases that we've included in this budget are 3% property tax revenue increase and a 4% targeted utility increase. So just to speak to this a little bit, because it's an area that the public at large doesn't always fully understand. When we target a property tax revenue increase, it does not automatically mean that their taxes are going up. You might assume that, but in reality, if the town grows, if the town grew at a rate of 3%, then by the time that the mill rate bylaw will be before council, there wouldn't necessarily need to be any increases as a result of that, because we grew. Whereas in a year where the town doesn't grow at all, there's no increase in the assessment roll, then we would be looking at increasing the mill rate to obtain that additional revenue. And the same is true for our utility bylaw. So at this point in time, there's a 4% increase included that impacts most users. That's our targeted revenue. But again, council has the authority to change that bylaw and change that revenue mix. This is a figure that we're looking to budget to and to obtain. So this effectively would give administration the mandate to come back with recommended mixes if that's something that council wanted to look at in the future, with a targeted revenue in mind. So that concludes our assumptions. I'm now going to very briefly speak to the community enhancement grant. So we did receive several applications this year, and the finance committee recommended, and this is included as part of the 2022 budget, that the Hay River Midnight Sun Rodeo received $9,500, 5,000 of which is in kind. The Hay River Museum Society received $5,000, and NAC received $5,000. Again, the library committee had applied under this policy, but it was not approved as a result of the assumption that we'd get support for that library contribution agreement. So that's the intention, and we are considering whether or not it would be beneficial and appropriate to enter into agreements of that nature with some of these other groups as well, and reviewing the community enhancement grant policy to see if it's still appropriate and if it's meeting the needs of the community. Now this chart's a little bit difficult to see, but this is our current organizational chart. The big changes from the previous year are that in the previous year budget, we did not fund the ASAO position, and as part of this budget, we're looking to fund that. There's also structural changes, like the Tourism Economic Development Coordinator previously reported to the Director of Recreation and Community Services. Now that rolls directly under SAO. So we're on to the 2022 budget. And so just to start here, we'll do a very high level summary. And then we'll look at each department, and on each departmental slide, we have a year-over-year comparison. So as you can see, we put together a budget that balances. And this budget does include the $1.7 million transfer to capital. Want to note that this budget does exclude amortization expense, and it also excludes revenue that the town would recognize as a result of capital grants. So in short, when the town receives capital grants, we don't recognize the revenue until we've earned it, until we spend that money on something that meets the standard, meets the rules for that grant. So up the other, if we have unearned revenue, it sits as a deferred liability on the town's financial statement. So we don't budget for those figures because it's very, very difficult to accurately estimate it. And on the amortization expense, it does matter from an accounting perspective, but it really doesn't from an operational perspective. But you will, when we get around to getting the 2021 audited financial statements before council, you will see both of those numbers on those statements. So I'll just speak briefly to the overall approach that we used when we were assembling the budget. We started by building in any known cost increases. So some of our vendors have provided the town notice of rate increases. So if we feel like those are unavoidable, we included those numbers in our budget. We included the salary increase to reflect the collective agreement. We reduced it by our increase in the vacancy rate, so that largely netted off. We doubled the asphalt budget, and you'll see that when we get down to public works, and that's to account for patching work that we anticipated doing in 2021 not occurring. So after we built in our known items, we then performed a line-by-line review and adjusted based on 2 or 3 year actuals. So we looked at where we're at as a Q3 in 2021 and where we're at as a full year in 2020, 2019, sometimes we went back as far as 2018 to really get a sense of are these line items, are they real expenses, or were they just built in as contingent expenses? It was a challenge a couple of years ago, and it's still something that we're rooting out of our budget. These pots of money that we had a budget for something in the event that we need it, but it might be something that only happens once every 10 years. And so, the approach we're taking now is that if the need arises, we have a discussion and we do the work. Even if it's not a budgeted item, we'll find the money for it later if it's if it's emergency, if it requires that. But we've stopped the practice largely of budgeting for things that might happen, because it leads to excess forecast adjustments at the end of the year. And that's what we've seen for the past 2 years, is very large forecast adjustments at our Q2 and Q3 financial statements. So this creates a more accurate picture for council from the get-go. So I'm going to move on now to, apologies. Just give me one moment. I think I've hidden these slides. We're back. So we'll start with the SAO mayor and council slide. So we've got a minor increase, as I mentioned, to councillor indemnity. And overall, we have an increase to the SAO's budget. And that's as a result of us budgeting for that ASAO position. Last year it existed in the org chart, but we didn't apply any budget to it because we were quite sure we weren't going to be filling it. Now it's a position that we're looking to fill. And so we offset that in large part by reducing our consulting dollars. Moving on to finance and administration. So this is over 2 slides, so revenue and then expenses. So a lot of the revenues that the town generates fall under finance and administration, because this is where our tax revenue is. So included in this is the 3% revenue increase. Now, again, it shows as 1.7% to property taxes and then 4.64% to grant and lieu. On the whole, the targeted increase is 3%, but where that will actually land, well, that becomes a decision for council when it comes time for mill rate discussion, and it will depend on the aforementioned assessment role that we get from the government. Now, one thing I wanted to point out here, one very material change in 2020, or sorry, in the 2021 budget, we included $323,000 as MACA had indicated that we'd receive additional funding. At that point, we weren't aware of the nature of the funding. Ultimately, it's going to come through as a CPI. And so in 2021, we included it as part of our operational budget. But in 2022, we've moved it out of here and we've correctly put it into our capital budget. And so as a result of that change, had that change not occurred, we'd actually be targeting a $2 million transfer to capital this year. But as a result of that $323,000 moving, we've changed our target as a result of the O&M budget to 1.7 to keep our capital plan whole. Now, a few other small changes in this were, again, just as a result of, we made pretty significant changes to our fees and charges bylaw. So we are anticipating there's going to be some additional revenues as a result of those changes. Moving on to the finance and administration expense side. As you can see here, we're continuing the process to consolidate our general ledger. So there's 1252, 1253, 1290. We basically shifted these budgets into 1210, which is our general administration function. So you do see a bit of that. We eliminated the election expense because the election is done. We won't have that for another 3 years. And other than that, those are really your major changes that occurred in this function. Onwards to protective services. So a couple of bigger changes here. We shifted where the bylaw enforcement position, that budget had previously rolled under fire protection. So we've moved that out to its own function. And we actually did trim this budget pretty significantly. You see a $10,000 overall increase, but But that's inclusive of $50,000 line item that we included for 2022, which is new. It's a one-time expense for a safety review. So, net of that, we actually had about a $40,000 overall reduction in our budgeted expense for protective services. We're also noting, and this has been a trend now for 2 years, and we expect it's going to continue, an increase in our ambulance billing. And so we've bumped up that number. We're actually expecting for 2021 that will be in excess of $500,000. But again, for budget purposes, we didn't want to increase it by that drastically. And again, these are estimates. We don't know how many ambulance calls we're going to get, but the trend has been an increase over the past couple of years. Moving on to environmental and public health. So we see a reduction in expenses, and part of this is just cleaning up the coding, but reduction in monitoring and maintenance to reflect the fact that we haven't had to spend those dollars as part of the O&M budget. That doesn't mean the work hasn't been going on. It's just been getting done as capital improvements. So again, that's just an inconsistency from our previous budget cycle, and I guess 2 or 3 years ago, really. And so over time, by adjusting to actual, we're effectively cleaning up those discrepancies. Moving on to recreation community services. So again, similar to finance and admin, we break this out between the revenue side and the expense side. So at this point in time, I just want to point out, we're still showing our tourism revenues and expenses as part of recreation. So as part of our 2023 budget, we'll have shifted those to roll under the SAO. But for the time being, you're still going to see that as part of Rec's budget until we can make that change. It's been difficult to budget for recreation just because of COVID uncertainty. COVID impacts the entire organization, but I think the impacts have been most drastic in recreation. And so it's been difficult to accurately know where we're going to land on some of these things. But in general, we're budgeting for more normalized operations going into 2022. So again, we've no huge changes. You've got a $5,000 increase in revenue overall that we're budgeting. Again, hopefully it'll be better. Hopefully we'll be able to keep that facility open full time and have it as many people in there as possible, taking advantage of the great features that they've been building into that building. But it's again, there's a fair bit of uncertainty with COVID on the revenue side. On the expense side, there has been again, as a result of some of the capital work that we've done in the community center, there has been a marked reduction in both heat and electrical expenses. And so some of that is reflected here. Now, with that said, we do know that there's pressure on heat costs. And so we didn't want to be too optimistic in reducing those budgets, given where the price of heating has been for the past few months. Also note here, this is where the library funding lands. And so there's a $14,000 increase for that item to reflect where we think that agreement's gonna land. But overall, we're seeing a 2.6% decrease in our expenses, which again, when you factor in that we've got salary pressure, and a lot of our salaries do roll under recreation, we do see some positive variances, positive anticipated variances from the previous year. Moving on to public works. So public works is an area that we've struggled with in terms of we've had large forecast adjustments to this department, and a lot of that is attributable to the work not getting done. We've had vacancies in the foreman position for at least the past couple of years, and we've currently got a vacancy in the director role as well. So that limits our ability to do some of the preventative maintenance type work that we may otherwise like to be doing. And so as a result of that, we did trim some of these budgets to reflect that the actuals have been lower. But the big increase here, as I mentioned, is within summer roads. We effectively doubled that budget from 325,000 up to just over 600,000. But again, that was partially offset by reductions in all of the other public works divisions, and no changes to the public works budgeted revenues at this point. So onto the utility fund. As I mentioned, this is its own standalone fund. It does need to be self-liquidating. So we're budgeting a very healthy looking $867,000 surplus in this fund, which again would be a transfer to capital. However, I do want to point out that this is pre-amortization expense, and the utility fund does, since it includes all of the underground pipe infrastructure, it's got a very hefty amortization expense. If I recall, it was over $700,000 last year as its amortization expense. Big changes here. Again, we're budgeting additional utility sales revenue. That's that 4% targeted revenue that I mentioned earlier. We also have a slight bump in the funding that we receive from MACA, going from $1,050,000 to $1,095,000. We included a modest increase for what we anticipate the additional cost for our trucked water provider will be. And we trimmed in a few areas relating to, again, just overall maintenance. If the work's not getting done, hasn't been getting done for a couple of years, we're trimming the budget until we get to a point with that the need presents itself. If we continue to be successful in obtaining capital dollars and we're able to continue to replace our underground infrastructure, it does reduce some of the need to perform maintenance. As the infrastructure ages, we have more breaks, more unexpected issues that results in additional cost. And moving on to our third and final fund, the land fund. We had initially budgeted land sales in 2021, and none of those occurred in 2021. The Fraser Place project, we budgeted 1.4 million in sales for that, and that was deferred until 2022. So we've included that figure in our 2022 budget. Also included in the 2022 budget is the 10 lots in Vail Island those should be up for sale in January, and that matters before council, or will be on our next regular meeting. So all of the revenues associated with the sale of land we're currently showing as expenses. So that's where you've got the current corresponding land development costs. The big change year over year here is we are anticipating higher lease fees, and that's largely as a result of the town entering into lease agreements relating to the old NTCL or MTS property. As a result of that transaction, the town received some parcels of land and some buildings, and we've been entering into lease agreements with those tenants, and so that resulted in an uptick in our budgeted revenue. So that brings us to the end of our presentation, but I'll just summarize a couple of points here. We're targeting $190,000 of tax revenue. So just at a very high level, this is net of our seniors tax exemption. A 1% increase in property taxes is about $63,000 in additional net revenue. So we're looking at about 190,000 if we target a 3% increase. We're looking at $81,200 in targeted utility increases, and we bumped up our user fees conservatively. Just because you increase the cost of a user fee, that doesn't necessarily result in additional revenue. if you charged $100 to go swimming, people aren't going to go swimming. So it's we know that our fees and charges bylaw is in effect, and there were some changes to our fee rates in there, but we just bumped up our revenues very conservatively to reflect that. As I mentioned, we did include our 1.75% salary increase in this budget and a $1.7 million transfer to capital, and the big change to our asphalt repairs budget is included as well. So that concludes my presentation. I'll put it back to SAO Smith if he has any additional comments, and then we can open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Sam's done an excellent job, I think, on presenting the budget and what's been presented already to the finance committee and discussed at that level. But yeah, it's a time right now in the market across Canada, certainly up here, we're starting to see the impacts of inflation, and magnitudes of some of our service agreements that have CPI built in the contract are over 4%. Arguably we're going to see more than that, and probably for the year we're well over 5%. So I think we've done a really good job at tightening up some of the spend where we can, where there's been some areas that in the past have been budgeted in case something happens. We've removed that, so there's a bit more risk with the budget, but I think we prevented a very fair and modest increase in consideration of those factors and some of the natural inflation that we see through our budget, while at the same time preserving some of the key maintenance areas, activities, say in public works that we want to increase or suggesting to increase, including the asphalt patching, some of the summer roads work, review of that department, some of the asset management work that councils wanted to move forward. So I think we're just open to questions at this point and getting feedback as we move towards the December 20th approval of the budget.
Thank you, SAO Smith, and thank you to the Director of Finance and the Finance Committee for their extensive work on our budgets. And I'll just open the floor for questions. Do we have any questions from council? Councillor Bouchard.
Maybe just for clarity, you mentioned the seniors, and I know that was a topic at election, and I think we've talked about it as a cap and stuff like that, but right now the plan is to keep it the way it is, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just and a follow-up to that is, do we have any anticipation of how many people will take advantage of that going forward? Like, I know our population's aging, and at what point do we have 25% of the population? Do we have 20%, 30%? Is that, I'm assuming that's growing because I'm hearing that, but do we equate any of that into that we're losing revenue because we're not getting that, right? But I know half that cost comes from the territorial government, half cost comes from us. So we don't get the revenue from the GNWT. The GNWT, is that, or do we get half the revenue from the GNWT? So just looking for the cost and projections of what we see that doing over the next, let's say 3 to 5 years.
Thank you, Councillor Bouchard. SAO Smith.
Yeah, I can't recite any figures off my that I have available, but let's check in with the Director of Finance in case he's been modeling or watching some of the trends. Obviously, we know that an aging population increases, and we've seen more people staying here in Hay River as a retirement location. We've got a strong senior society, so we are seeing some of those pressures. The Property and Taxation Act's being reviewed, and some changes may come through that as well. This council is also very motivated to open up other housing options within the community to meet those people that are seniors that perhaps are looking to get out of their larger homes. So we could see a fair amount of change in the next few years. And obviously all this is at discretion of council to have more discussions as we look at tax levying and such. But I'll just pass it to the Director of Finance to see if there's any information he may have at this time.
Thank you, SAO Smith. Deputy Mayor Dowie, to the question, Councillor Bouchard. We looked at the issue a couple of years ago, and at that point in time, it was costing the town around $275,000. So that was the town's share. So that's for seniors and for disabled persons. Both groups are eligible for exemption on their principal residency. At that point, we did some scenario analysis. We looked at hypothetically what it would look like to impose a cap. And from the town's perspective, it doesn't move the needle that much unless the cap is below at a $2,000 level. It still has a significant cost to the town, but it would save the town around $70,000, which again, that's about a percentage point. So at that point in time, that council didn't recommend making any changes to it because it was viewed as, any reduction on the town share is a double hit to the senior or to the disabled person because they lose that matching dollar from the GNWT. So at that point, it was, the decision was to pursue revenue through other means. And that's why, as a result of this budget, we don't have any recommendations on that. It was a question that was surveyed, and about half the respondents felt that it should be left in place. About 40% felt that there should be some cap imposed, and then only 2 or 3 respondents felt that it should be eliminated entirely. So I think that's enough information. In terms of extrapolating where it's going to go in the future, your guess is as good as mine. There is demographic shift. We do have an aging population. So I don't know what it would cost us in the future, but I would expect it's not going to go down. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any other questions from council? Councillor Duford, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Not a question, just a comment. First, I want to say thank you to the administration and the finance department for the great job of doing this. I sit on the finance committee, so I've already been through these and was impressed with their work and how they're consolidating a lot of ledger lines, and it's making it a lot easier for a lay person to see what the town has to go through. So I want to say thank you very much for that. Just a comment on the 10 lots that are proposed going up for sale in Vail Island. I did have a couple of feedback from some residents of Vail Island that expressed concern that the town should tread carefully because there have been some drainage problems out there that were really exacerbated this summer from the high rains and the high water levels, and residents out there are questioning the wisdom of inviting more people to take up residence there until we have a stronger idea of what we're going to be doing to address some of those problems. So just some comments that I've had some feedback, and other than that, fully in agreement with this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duford. Any other questions from council? Councillor Bouchard.
Yeah, again, probably not a question, more just a statement that, just being there for the finance committee review, it's just, there is a bunch of pressures there, whether that's wage increases or fuel costs or, even patching and stuff like that cover the increase that we're having. No, ideally we'd like to say zero hold, but I think, for any of the public that are watching, it's just like everyone knows there's increases. There's the, cost of living is going up all the time, and the town probably has several different pressures that it's seeing, and I think 3% is probably low for what our actual costs are, because taxpayers are just paying for part of the bill. We still get a lot of money from the government, so yeah, it's just a factor of today's life and COVID and expenses going up. So yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bouchard. And yeah, I'll echo that. I think everyone here, this will be my 10th budget, and probably the best put together that I've seen in terms of, like Councillor Duford said, at least ease of understanding. The first budget that I looked at as a councillor was 3 pages on an Excel spreadsheet. So there's a lot more into this, and I appreciate the work by administration and the finance committee. I have a couple of questions, and the answer may have been in there or maybe obvious, but on the protective services side, we're looking at about a $40,000 decrease in the midst of essentially a doubling of the call volumes on the department. And I'm maybe an assumption on my part, but I'm guessing that the increased revenues that we have been seeing, especially on the ambulance side, are we expecting that makes up the difference? Is that why we're confident that we can have those decreases? And then seeing vehicle and building maintenance going down by 100%. I'm just, do we think that that's maybe realistic in terms of vehicle maintenance? That's obviously one of those things that is needed on an ongoing basis. So just on those, if we could there, SAO Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. We are projecting the revenue increases based on call volumes that we have seen, and with that comes some expenses related to paid on call. But as for the maintenance line items, I think the Director of Finance can speak a little bit more to where some of those figures may have moved to.
Sure. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In general, so as part of the old general ledger structure, we have 2400, which is fire production, and then we had 2401, which is vehicle maintenance, 2402, which is building maintenance, and we actually had separate GL codes for each asset within those departments. So every ambulance, every fire truck had its own GL code. It was unnecessary. So we still track that level of detail. We use it's like a tag. It's called Cost Center 1 in our accounting system. But each asset's tagged, and so when we're coding an invoice, we just include that tag as an addition to that general ledger code. So we were able to eliminate a whole slew of the GL accounts by doing that. This year we went one step further. So we basically just rolled 2401 and 2402 under your fire protection budget. Now you can still see that overall you're still within that 2401, 2400, 2401, 2402 total $50,000 reduction roughly. And a lot of that comes back to we were previously budgeting for contingent events. So those are, if I saw we had a $10,000 budget for something and it hasn't been spent in 4 years, it's tough to justify keeping that in the budget. That doesn't mean that it might not be something that we need to spend. And as SAO Smith mentioned in his remarks, this budget does carry significantly more risk than the budgets that I've presented in the past 2 years as a result of removing some of those cushions. We're trending downwards in an environment where inflation is running at 4 or 5%, and so that there is risk there if things happen. I wouldn't be saying we shouldn't spend that money if the need arises, and so that'll be a discussion with administration and with council if those circumstances arise. There is, with this overall budget, it's an aggressive target. Like we went from 2 years ago budgeting $1 million surplus to last year 1.5, and now if you normalize it for that CPI adjustment, it would be a $2 million surplus. So that's big moves for a town of our size. So again, there is some risk here with that. But I don't think it's something, if the situation arises, that we wouldn't do, especially if it involves public safety. But you can look at the past two years, we've been $100,000 under in our $1 million protective services budget. So we're not going to have that to give back next year, right? That's ultimately where this lands. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Director. And then just the other comment I have, more of a comment than a question, I guess, is the on the public works side, the 100% decrease in drainage. I obviously understand that we've got drainage in our capital plan, which is fine. I think that's likely where it probably belongs. Just that in my time on council, we've had drainage move from the capital plan to O&M back to the capital plan, and it gets a little confusing over time as to whether the work has happened. I mean, the first time I saw it move from capital to O&M, my assumption was that nothing was going to be done with it, and that's why it was moved to O&M. And I think I, at the time, actually voted against the entire budget based on that. And now there's drainage back in capital and a removal of it from O&M. So it gets hard to juggle back and forth. But overall, I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and I know that there were, I think we all understand the ramifications of our budgets and what they mean to the community. But the fact that there were a lot of decreases and cuts within before we start, talking about increasing revenues, I think that's an important thing for the public to see as well, that we aren't just looking at the budget and passing it on to our ratepayers altogether. There is work that goes into this internally to try to reduce that, and I do appreciate that. So other than that, are there any further questions from council? All right, seeing none. Seeing none, agreed to move forward. Agreed. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my agenda here. So that will put us on to 6E, the Emergency Services Monthly Report for November. Do we have a mover? Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River approves the Emergency Services Activity Report for November 2021 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. We have a seconder. Councillor Duford, any questions to the motion? Agreed to take forward? Agreed. Right, 6F, the Municipal Enforcement Monthly Report for November. Do we have a mover? Councillor Duford, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River accepts the Municipal Enforcement Report for November 2021 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Duford. Is there a seconder? Councillor Wall. Agreed to take forward? Sorry, any questions before we do? Agreed to take forward? Agreed. I saw a bunch of hands there. All right, 6G, the Public Works Monthly Report for November. We have a mover. Councillor Bouchard.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Moved by myself, I move that the Council of the Town of Hay River accepts the Public Works Monthly Report for November 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Bouchard, seconded by Councillor Duford. Any questions to the motion? Agreed to take forward? Agreed. All right, 6H, the Recreation Monthly Report for November. We have a mover. Councillor Chambers, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River accepts the report entitled Recreation and Community Services Monthly Report for November 2021 as presented.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Duford, any questions to the motion? Agreed to take forward? Okay, agreed. Right, 6I, the ambulance cot tender award. You have a mover? Councillor Duford, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River awards the tender for the supply, delivery, and installation of a new electrical medical cot to Medical Surgical Supply Limited.
Thank you, Councillor Duford. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bouchard, any questions to the motion? On being noted, agreed to take forward? Agreed. And 6J, land disposal of Vale Island lots. Do we have a mover? I think we've lost Councillor Bouchard. In the meantime, do we have a mover of the motion?
Deputy Mayor, he's actually in conflict, so he's gone for a few minutes.
All right, I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry, I didn't see the mover. Councillor Chambers, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River approves the following recommendations. 1, minimum bid price as noted below for lots 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30, Block H, Plan 4668, and lots 31, 32, 33, 34, and 35, Block H, Plan 4791. 2, that these lots be disposed of by method of auction, and 3, administration to forward a land disposal bylaw to council.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. We have a seconder. Councillor Duford, any questions to the motion? I just have one. Is there, I mean, we've done it a few different ways over the years. I just wondering if there are, if we have, why auction over, a lottery or any other method? Have we? I'm sure there's a reason for that. Just looking for clarity there, SAO.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, a couple of reasons. One, the idea of an auction has been proposed or suggested, again, with some interest over the last several years that I've been here. But typically we have been going with the lottery type of draw for new lots. So it's something we thought we could try, especially in consideration of some of our appraisals that we've received on the lots. We've had an older appraisal, I think from 2019 on the 5 lots that were originally surveyed, and then more recently through the rezoning, the new 5. But there's a bit of uncertainty or I'll say discussions with the appraisers on how those were achieved. So it does provide a mechanism. So while we feel like we've ended at a fair price in consideration of multiple factors, it does allow you to better test the original or the thought assessed value or appraised value. So it will test the market through an actual auction. And if they do not go through auction, obviously they'll be available at those minimum prices that are set in the report.
Thank you, SAO. Any other questions on the motion? None being noted, agreed to take forward. Agreed. And then if we can get Councillor Bouchard back. It'll be 6K bank signing authority report. We'll just wait for Councillor Bouchard. Right. Here's Councillor Bouchard is back. Do we have a mover to the motion? The recommendation, sorry. Councillor Duford,
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River appoints the following council and administrative representatives as bank signing authorities. Mayor Candace Jameson, Deputy Mayor Keith Dowie, Senior Administration Officer Glenn Smith, and Director of Finance and Administration Sam Mugford.
thank you, Councillor Duford. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Bouchard, any questions? Agreed to take forward? Agreed. And then last but not least, 6L under new business, excused absence for Councillor Grunewagen. Do we have a mover? Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that the Council of the Town of Hay River appoints, oh, no, I'm on the wrong one here.
Sorry, we probably don't have one written, but it would be just to excuse Councillor
Okay.
Grunewagen from.
So I would ask that the council excuse Councillor Groenwagen from this meeting.
We have a seconder. Councillor McGill. Any questions?
Do we have one for the mayor? No, there was no request.
I don't believe so, but we could do probably all of the mayor's like requested excused absences at the next regular meeting. Other than that, are we agreed to take forward? Agreed. I don't believe, SAO Smith, that we have an in camera for this evening.
No, Deputy Mayor, I don't think anything's been discussed, so.
Okay. In that case, we need, oh, Councillor Duford, you have the honors this evening. Go ahead, you're on mute.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As the oldest sitting councillor tonight, I'll move that the meeting be adjourned.
No, Deputy Mayor, I don't think anything's been discussed, so.
All right. Well, thank you all. Councillor, see you at the next regular, I don't know, we got, I think our council off of mute.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As the oldest sitting councillor tonight, I'll move that the meeting be adjourned.
We've adjourned twice. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Well, thank you all.